I can think of a lot of different characters and actors that I love. So many of my favorite movies are defined by my connection to the performances of the actors and the way they bring the characters to life. But I think the most remarkable performances I've ever seen in any media are Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson's portrayals of Joel and Ellie in The Last of Us video games. There haven't been many video games that have emotionally affected me in the way that these games did. They managed to tell possibly the most beautifully heartbreaking story I've ever watched, and they use the interactive medium of video games to their advantage in order to be able to do so. The scene that I want to focus on is at the very end of The Last of Us Part 2, and while this game is much longer than the first one and it has some problems in my opinion, it still has some of my favorite moments I've ever experienced in a story. The game follows Ellie from the first game, who's now grown up and dealing with her complicated feelings about Joel as a father figure after he's murdered. It follows her going on a destructive revenge quest to avenge his death, and it reveals more and more about their relationship through that storyline. The game sprinkles in flashbacks of Joel and Ellie interacting with each other in between the events of the two games' stories. All of these are placed perfectly and give the audience an emotional reaction simply from seeing Joel again after going through so much of the game trying to avenge his death. But the final one of these flashbacks isn't shown to us until the very end of the game, and it shows us the last conversation that Joel and Ellie ever had with each other, the night before Joel was killed. The game's climax is a final confrontation between Ellie and Abby, Joel's killer, and Ellie has the chance to finally kill her, but there's this brief flash in her mind of Joel sitting on the porch with a guitar, and this gets Ellie to stop and spare Abby's life. The game leaves the player questioning if they'll ever find out what that image truly means, and why it was powerful enough to get Ellie to stop before she's achieved what she's pursued for the entire story. But then a few minutes later, the screen cuts to black, and it makes you think, maybe the game's over, maybe you're about to see the credits roll. But instead, you start to hear the soft sound of guitar strumming start to play, and the screen lights back up again, showing you Joel sitting on the porch playing a guitar. At this point, my eyes were glued to the screen. I was absolutely captivated, wide awake at 6 a.m. on a winter morning after I had stayed up all night, unable to put the game down. I watched as Ellie walked up to Joel, and he saw her there, pleased to see her, but also visibly surprised that she was finally willing to talk to him. They have a conversation about some seemingly unimportant things and some important things that they needed to talk about, but there's this tension and subtext to everything that they're saying and everything in their performances that makes it so compelling to listen to, no matter what it is they're talking about. And then Ellie explicitly brings up what it is everyone's really thinking about while they're listening to this conversation, which is the true thing that Joel took from Ellie when he saved her life at the end of the last game. He took her chance to have purpose and have a chance to have a life that mattered in this bleak, cruel world that they live in, which is all that anybody in this story really wants. But Joel confesses he doesn't regret his decision, because even just a moment more that he could spend with her was worth dooming the rest of humanity. She was his purpose. And this is the first time in the scene where Troy Baker stands up straight and gives Joel a position of power and confidence in contrast to the slouching position that the character took for the rest of the scene. This is also one of the only times in the scene where he makes direct eye contact with his scene partner, Ellie, and I think a lot of people can underestimate how important eye contact, or the lack thereof, can be in a conversational scene. It indicates so much about a character's mental state and the way they feel about who they're talking to. But after Joel says this, Ellie replies by saying she doesn't think she could ever forgive him for that. And the pause after Ashley Johnson delivers this line makes the audience think that's where it ends. That's the moment. Ellie chose never to forgive Joel. But that's not it at all, because she finishes this sentence with the words, "But I would like to try." And Joel responds to Ellie by saying, fuck. And Joel responds to her by saying, "I'd like that." And you can hear his voice start to choke up, and you see him start to cry, and then Ellie leaves him there on the porch. She was willing to forgive him, or at least to find it in her heart if it was possible, but she never got the chance to do that. That's what was truly taken from her when Joel was killed. That's why she took off on this insane revenge quest, because she didn't want to have to stop and process how she truly felt about Joel and what he'd done. And by the time she finally does, it may as well be too late. She's lost everything. She's destroyed her life, and it all was for nothing. And that's what she's realizing when she recalls this moment. She will never get back what she really wanted, which was the chance to mend her relationship with Joel and to tell him that she forgave him. This scene is perfectly written and acted. Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson are incredibly, incredibly talented, and they managed to make Joel and Ellie two of my favorite characters in all of fiction. And that simple conversation scene between these two characters standing on a porch is quite possibly the most emotionally powerful thing I've ever watched, and I will forever love The Last of Us Part 2 because of that.